Yeah, your side actually sounds really good. I was a little nervous because when I talked to Dali in Sumatra, it was a long time ago, but Skype was not connected very well.
Awful over there?
Sounds good over here, though.
Great. We've got really good Wi-Fi, and I'm in my house. I haven't really gone anywhere recently, so the Wi-Fi over here is pretty good. I mean, Delhi in itself, in India, has pretty good internet, but any other place other than Delhi, not very reliable actually.
Really?
So, yeah. So, being the capital, and it's really cheap. Internet over here is just dirt cheap. And, we had this company called Reliance, which is pretty big, but they sort of gave out free internet to a lot of people. So, I mean, everyone is connected in Delhi at least. I don't know about the other states because I don't travel to the other states as much.
Right. Well, that's nice about the free internet.
Well, it has its drawbacks. I mean, we have people commenting on white women on the internet to send nudes and stuff. So
right.
That's pretty disturbing.
Yeah.
Which is very common.
That's pretty common everywhere, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Especially India. I mean, brown people have an issue with that. So, I mean, see, it's got its drawbacks and,
yeah.
So yeah.
Well, once you're connected, some people tend to take advantage of that. So. Oh,
a little too much
funny.
than I would like for them to, but yes,
Yeah,
a little too much.
When
we thought that they perhaps, they set up their lives, maybe open an e-commerce site and the farmers will sell their seeds, but all they're doing is sending obscene texts to the people around the world. So that's a concern.
The companies are like, that's not why we gave you free internet. That's incredible.
It's a serious problem in here. I mean, in India, it's a big problem because, they grow up watching Hollywood movies, especially the outskirts, not the metropolitan cities, but the outskirts. They grow up watching Hollywood movies and all, and they think that the society over there is very liberal. So that's their only acquaintance with the culture over there. I've traveled abroad and I've traveled in my own country, so I know better, but that's not the case over here. Yeah.
So for the Hollywood movies over there, do they do subtitles or do they do voiceovers?
No. So it's as weird as it is. It's India is the second or the third. I mean, the second official language is English. But the only problem is that half of them speak like Apu from The Simpsons. So it's thank you, come again, and it's a very. So the issue is that India is so diverse in its culture and even the concept of race. What happens is if you come to India, it's this structure. You go to the southern part of India, and you have people with a darker skin tone, and their language, the script that they use and the language that they speak is very different from the rest of the Indo-Aryan languages, which, I mean, we speak English. English is an Indo-Aryan language. So these Indo-Aryan languages originated in Europe and India. So a lot of English words are from Hindi. For example, thug was the Hindi word which meant a person who loots other people's property. So you have these words that have this commonality from Indo-European languages, but you go to the south part of India, which is mainly this. So they look like. Have you seen Australoid or Aborigines of Australia?
Yes.
So the South Indian, people in the South look similar to that. Their racial features are very similar to Australoids. Also sort of similar to black people, but more similar to Australoids. And then you start moving towards the northern part of the subcontinent, and you see a very distinct change in the features where they have very similar features to Eastern European countries and almost Caucasian features and lighter skin tones. And you keep moving north and you keep going upwards till you reach a point in the northeast of the subcontinent where the race is the Mongoloid race. So they've got the eyelids and the very, very fair skin and very thin, straight hair. So it's racially very diverse, and in terms of language and culture as well. You go to the south, people are highly educated, but very religious and a predominantly vegetarian diet. I mean, of course, in the recent times, they've started eating non-veg and all of that, but then generally a very vegetarian diet. You come to the north, people are known for eating a lot of grain and not as much rice. So there's a very big disconnect between the south and the north, where people from the south don't like the people from the north, and the people from the north don't like the northwest. So it's very complicated racially. But let me just explain to you this way: the way you have in your states, you have some laws that are specific to certain states and not the overall country.
Right.
Where India, you have culture that differentiates from state to state. So you have people from one state that think that people from the other state are unrelated. They are unrelated too. So they can't really sympathize with them. They can't speak the language as well sometimes. So even though we have a core language that is Hindi, but every state has a different language and every state has a different culture. And I mean, of course, you can go into deep complexities of it. There's a different in cuisine and all of that. So when you see the stereotypical Indian, which you see in movies in Hollywood, they're most likely from the south. Not
interesting. I would not have guessed it was like that.
It is, and there's something that I keep learning every now and then as well. Since I don't travel much to the south, the one time that I did go to the south, I was treated as people from other countries are treated. I was treated as a tourist, not as someone who's visiting his own country.
Wow.
So that's that.
So I know you've traveled around. So what's been your favorite place that you've ever traveled?
I really liked Morocco, but that was a very long time ago. I think I was a teenager. In the recent past, I've been to Bhutan, which I really liked. I really like Nepal as well. In my own continent, in my own subcontinent, I like the northern and the northeastern part better because it's very lush. I mean, the rainforests over there are, they find new species every year. So as a naturalist, because that is my profession, I find that very fascinating that there are still parts of the world in my own country where they're constantly finding new things, which I did not know of before. So that's something I really liked. We go to the south as well. It's really nice. I mean, there are trees. We don't have redwoods over here, obviously, but then when I go to the south part of the Indian subcontinent, there are trees that dwarf you, 60 meter, 70 meter tall trees, and forests of them. So that's something I really like. But culturally, I really like Bhutan because of all the places that I've been to, Bhutan has this certain mystical charm about it, which I guess people from other countries feel when they come to India. They think they'll have a mystical experience, but I didn't have any mystical experience in here. So when I went to Bhutan, that is one place that has this there are certain monasteries in Bhutan, let me put it this way, that you can walk into, and there's this very eerie sense of foreboding, almost. It's hard to describe a pinpoint, but it just feels otherworldly, right? It feels very odd. Yeah, so I really like Bhutan.
Yeah, and when I first read your email, I was so excited, and of course, it's always very nice to hear from people from other countries. What's that?
For the insider access that you gave me, which is something I can't express enough gratitude for.
Yeah, of course. No, I'm glad you're enjoying it. Yeah, you bet. So, I mean, how did you come across, not maybe specifically my show, but I mean, is that something that is very common over there, is listening to paranormal podcasts and it's okay to talk about things like that?
Not at all. So, in India, the concept of paranormal and, so let's say your podcast, for example, you cover a wide array of topics, everything from cryptids to UFOs and paranormal, in a broad term, painted with a broad stroke. But in India, everything is clubbed under paranormal. So you don't have the concept of a cryptid, or you don't have the concept of the UFO phenomena. Everything is clubbed under one thing, which is the paranormal, which by its definition in India is also religious in a way.
Okay.
For example, if we were to see something like you remember my email where I told you about this forest ranger who had seen who had thought he had seen a half snake, half human-like figure. Now in India, that would be worshipped because snakes are considered sacred, and that particular thing, whatever it was that he saw, whether it was a vision or a real thing, he perhaps would consider himself blessed for having witnessed. So it borderlines a religion, all right? Paranormal borderlines religion over here, and does not differentiate from the concept of religion itself. The lights in the sky that you might see in any other country, UFO phenomena that you might consider not paranormal, but more perhaps metaphysical, I don't know, perhaps metaphysical, would over here be considered a religious experience. Everything is religious and clubbed under the same term. So no, you don't have a lot of people listening to podcasts. They're very fond of ghost stories and the paranormal I mean, ghosts are a big thing in India, right? They really like the concept of ghosts over here. There are YouTube channels sincerely dedicated to the whole concept and the whole. So you have, I think, Ghost Adventures in the US. Zach Bagans, this guy, and the other. They did a show in Bobby Mackey's or something, which I saw a couple of years back. And I remember that the moment that show started telecasting over here, you had channels after channels in India just taking it up and producing these low-grade bootleg versions of the same.
Wow.
So ghost hunting and ghosts are a very interesting concept over here. But other than that, no, there's no such thing as the UFO experience over here. You have a lot of cryptid allegations, but then you don't have no societies as such that search for cryptids. You don't have... So that's how I can put it across. So not a lot of people. How I found your podcast is interesting. I was actually searching for, and I can't really find the link, which I just wanted to find. I wanted to set it up so I could tell you. But then about a few months ago, I was searching for podcasts to follow. So it was some website that had Into the Fray along with The Unexplained with Howard Hughes and a few suggestions.
Cool.
So that's one of the suggestions. That's how I found your podcast.
Awesome.
So
do you also listen to Howard Hughes? I do. I love him.
Yes, I do. I really like that guy.
He's so good. Yeah. His voice is just so soothing. Not that his content is boring, but it's just his voice is so soothing. Sometimes you're like, I think I could fall asleep to his voice.
Yes, absolutely. And I've done that. So,
right.
He has that, he's got this very, he has a way of, I wouldn't really say grilling or anything, but then he has a way of, to some people who are not familiar with the British wit, can almost see him as someone who's trying to be rude sometimes.
He's just trying to get
which he obviously does not do.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I've said that. I've said that I need to be more like Howard Hughes, the way that he interviews. I love because he's like, empathetic. Well, some people might say, and then he'll go into, why he might be pressing his guests. And I think that's a fantastic way to do it. Well, some people might.
I mean, that's perfect journalism in a sense.
Yes. And you can tell. He's been doing that his whole life. It's incredible.
Yes.
Yeah, you could tell.
What, 30 years or so?
Yeah.
So absolutely brilliant fellow. And
I wish I could send him just a ton of money and just to help him along. He is one of the guys that I would send money to, as far as just helping out another podcast monetary wise, because I know that, he's had his health problems and everything else, and he still is just pumping out that show. And, he's never even done any ads or anything, which.
Nothing at all.
That's good and bad. I mean, I can respect it hugely. I mean, I think I'm about to start doing ads because, the podcasting gets expensive and people are going to grumble and hate it. But I mean, I kind of have to. Yeah, but Howard Hughes, he's just been plugging away for years and years, doing the same thing, doing his intro, a killer interview. And then, he'll put out another show when he's ready. So that's amazing.
And he gets some really good people as well. I mean, I don't know how he gets that, but he gets some really good people over there.
Yeah, he's got some big friends. For me, I would rather talk to folks like you or just folks like me, just normal people that have had some really strange shit happen. I would rather do that instead of kind of just rehashing the same people that have gone on podcasts for years, and they're kind of saying the same thing over and over. Which, hey, we need that too. I've had them on my show. I'm not bashing them. I'm just saying I look forward to hearing original stories more, and I'm pretty sure that the audience would agree with me on that one. So,
I reckon. I mean, the one of the greatest things about your nation, about America, is the fact that you can be from a fringe audience and find like-minded people from the very same fringe audience. I mean, you can have support groups, and you can get podcasts, and you can have Bigfoot watchers collect together and have a beer and maybe wander into the woods. And you can have all these small snippets of people that do their 9-to-5 jobs, come back home, and maybe on a weekend, have these groups that they can connect to. But we don't have that. We don't have that over here, and that's the saddest part. So, for me to not just find your podcast, but to take that extra effort and say, all right, no, I appreciate this person's work, and I'll send them a mail and I'll tell them this is something that, and you responded and all of that, which was something that hasn't happened. It was one of the first times that I've experienced the whole community feeling that is very specific to the United States. I don't think any other country has that. I keep listening to these other podcasts, these other two Australian fellows called Mysterious Universe or something. Really good podcast as well, again. And they sigh about the same thing, that they don't have a community like that in Australia either. In India, it's barely existent at all. The mere fact that you would bother to talk to someone about, let's say, a Bigfoot encounter, or the very same one. I have people in my family who have had experiences, but would never know what to do with those experiences. They become ghost tales at the end of the day that you sit around a fire and talk about, and you go to sleep after that. So it's nothing. There's no concept of community support, which I think I really envy the US for, which is something I really wish we had over here. You don't.
So you've never come over here to travel or anything?
No, I've never come to the United States. I have been to the UK. I have been to Northern European countries. I've been to Iceland. I have been to Australia. So I've traveled quite a bit, but never to the US. No. I've been actually planning Kentucky for a while. There's this friend of mine. No, not Kentucky. Just a second. Where is it that Jack Daniels is brewed? I forgot the name of the place.
Oh,
is it Tennessee?
Tennessee, yeah.
Yes.
That's my favorite drink is Jack Daniels.
Yeah. So is mine.
Really?
Mine.
See? Mm-hmm. Well, if you come out here, we'll have to try to figure something out. We can both go to the distillery together.
Definitely. That's something I really want to try, yes. And Jim Beam as well. I really like, both of them actually. So yeah, Jim Beam, of course, being bourbon. But so this friend of mine, moved to Tennessee about a year back. And we had been really good friends for a very long time. And he's been bugging me for a very long time to visit. So I've been saving enough money, because the only thing expensive right now is the tickets and all. Rest, of course, there's no problem to stay and all, but then tickets have always been expensive to the US. Any other country you can travel to from India, but then US has always been very expensive ticket-wise.
That's too bad. Why do we have to be so stuck up with the ticket prices?
I know.
That's frustrating. Well, yeah, let's jump into some of these experiences that you emailed me. And
yes.
You are the one, and I messaged you earlier and I told you this, but I have been mentioning one of your stories that we will get to when you were out on your field study about the boas. I have been teasing that story. Yes. I don't know if you've been hearing that, but I've been mentioning that. I got a couple details wrong. Yes. Once I reread the email this morning, I was like, oops, got a couple details wrong, but we're going to finally get to hear about that.
As well. I think I got a few details wrong myself.
That's okay. So we all did that. You've had a number of things too, so.
Yeah. Where should we start?
Well, did you want to go in succession, or would you rather tell some of the secondhand stories? It's up to you. Like we could talk about the Ranger and then move to your grandfather and the Djinn stuff, which, by the way, you kind of mentioned, hey, if you want me to talk about this in more detail, absolutely, because I think that the whole Djinn subject is fascinating.
We'll do that. So let me start with the forest ranger, the half snake thing. Mm-hmm. So how should I build this up without sounding theatrical? But I was, I think 21, 22 something. And there's this sanctuary in, so do you call them sanctuaries or do you call them national parks over there?
National parks or reserves, national parks mostly.
National parks, all right. So we've got sanctuaries and reserves, and yes, a few national parks as well. We've got all three, but they work under the same supervision. So just different by the names because of the colonial influence, and that they're all the same. This particular place is called Bharatpur, which is in Rajasthan, which is the western part of India, and Rajasthan on its own is a desert, mostly, and dry and deciduous. But this particular place is a wetland. It's on the borders of the northern part of India and the western part of India. So it's on the borders and it's a wetland. So it's very marshy, a lot of water, not very dense of a forest, but not easy to maneuver through. The trees and so a lot of veins and a lot of smaller trees that don't grow maybe more than 20 to 30 feet, but all of them are very, very broad. So not very tall trees, but very broad. So doesn't get a lot of light, very canopied, and it's a bird sanctuary. So there's very, very rich in terms of avian life and a wetland, so a lot of amphibians as well. Quite a few turtles. In mammals, I think you have jackals and hyenas. So yeah, so not wild in the sense like any other sanctuary in India where you can not step out of a car. You have to take a gypsy or a canter, and that's the only way to go inside the sanctuary, because any other sanctuary in India has leopards and tigers, but this particular place does not. So you can actually walk the entire. It's about 18 kilometers square or 8 kilometers square, which I'm a little fuzzy on. So I went there as someone who just started getting into this field. And let me just, I think I should tell you, but it's very common in the US to have people who, you take your camping trips every now and then. People go to the wild and have an experience. Camping is like a very common thing over there, but not in India. You don't have camping as a common thing at all, because every wild place in India has a big cat. Either it's leopards or it's tigers, along with bears. So it's just flooded with carnivores. So you can't really, because of the safety issue. But other than that, even culturally, I don't think it's a big thing over here to camp. So yeah, but I really got into it because I was always fascinated with the natural world. So this was one of the first places I went to professionally, right? I didn't travel for leisure. I went there professionally. So I went there again. We were doing a census for birds, and I was with a group and I was under training. So we were doing a census for birds, and very specific birds. So we were looking for crested serpent eagles, which are these really big eagles that eat snakes. So this place is so this wetland has only one forest cottage inside the forest itself. Any other person who visits the sanctuary stays outside the forest. They can take an electric cycle or something like that, and they can travel on a bicycle around and inside the sanctuary. But after about 5 or 4, the sanctuary shuts off, so you have to go out. But for the people who are living inside, they can loiter around the entire day. And night. So the first night was nothing great, and I stayed there for a couple of nights. I hope I'm not building it up a little too much to bore you.
No, you're fine. It's good to set it up, and that way everybody knows, especially if we've never been there, so we're not sure of the terrain and what sort of animals and plants you have there.
Oh, thank you. So I was there for about 5 days, and I think that was the entire structure of the course or the study. And there was this forest guard over there who was about, I think, back then he might have been in his I think early 40s or mid 40s or something. So he wasn't a very old fellow, but he was getting there. So now he was a very, which is a rarity in India. He wasn't a superstitious fellow. He was a very scientific fellow in the way he operated, because that's what his work was. Hello.
Oh yeah, I'm here. I'm just listening.
All right. So he was, he was a fairly decent fellow in that aspect, and nothing about him gave off a religious person, he was borderline atheistic, and he didn't believe in rituals and all. And I say this because the first day that we were there, we were actually talking about something, and he was sighing in discontentment about the people that visit the sanctuary for a particular shrine that is next to it. So he was very, he sighed about the fact that people have no respect for the forest itself. They come and bow in front of a stone idol and things. So he didn't seem like the religious kind. So anyway, we were sitting around the fire the next day. And the first day it wasn't eventful or anything. The next day we were sitting around the fire, and I had a habit of taking a night stroll in the forest. And this wasn't uncommon or anything, because there were other people who used to do that as well. There are night jars and there are owls that are found only in the night. So people do that. Now, we're sitting around the fire, and this guy, this ranger, is he's talking very normally, and these two people get up and they're like, we're going to see the night jar or something. And I get up and I start walking away from him, and he calls me back and he speaks to me in Hindi. So I'll try my level best to translate it in true to the spirit of what he said. So he called me son. He said, you're still young and all, but be careful. And I'm in the prime of my youth. I'm 21, and I'm like, be careful about what? What are you talking about? There's nothing over here. There's no leopards. There's hyenas and there's jackals. Barely either of them have been known to attack. And I know danger when I see it. And I think I went on and on about. Inside, I felt that he was questioning my ability to, because when you're young, you feel like everyone is questioning and you have to prove yourself to people. So I thought he was questioning my ability, whether I can walk into the forest or not, something like that. Mm-hmm. And he said, what he said was, in Hindi, he said, yahan pe naag hain, which in English means there are nagas over here. So I understand in India, the word naga is interchangeable with a serpent. It is also interchangeable with a mythical breed of serpents that are half human, half snakes. So it's interchangeable. You can call a serpent, you can call a serpent a man serpent, but the word is naga nonetheless. So I said, what I told him is, I got a little baffled, and what I asked him was, cobras? Because cobra is a naga in the Indian tongue. So he says, nahi, naga hai yahan pe. Which means not cobras. He just said the same thing again. What he said was, no, there are serpents over here. Naga, let's say serpent for the sake of translation. And I got a little confused, a little bewildered to what he was saying. Mm-hmm. And then he's like, come sit with me. So I walk to the fire again, and we are sitting. And he's like, about 4 or 5 years ago, he was inside the forest, the same forest. And what he says word by word is that he was walking and he saw, and this is very reminiscent of the things that you talk about on your podcast as well. What he said was, he saw something like the camo colored, right? Very camouflage colored. But in retrospect, when I think about it, perhaps what he wanted to say was very similar to what a lot of people that you interview say, something like the predator cloak, mm-hmm. Something like the whole, the forest comes alive and all of that. So he's like, near the water, next to a tree, what he saw was, what he said word by word is, like something shimmery from the corner of his eyes. While he was walking, he caught something shimmery from the corner of his eyes. And when he looked, for the first few seconds, what he saw was something that looked like camouflage color or something wearing a camo suit. And he said that the longer he looked at it, the more confused he got, and he was filled with dread from the inside. Dread to the point where he couldn't move. And he got so shit scared that he couldn't move, and he was like, he just couldn't move. He just kept staring at the goddamn thing. And the thing, visually for him, was never really clear. Like he kept looking at it, and it kept confusing him to what he's seeing precisely.
Oh, God.
But what he says is that it was about 6 to 7 feet tall, and it was standing on something which did not look like legs, but looked like the tail of a snake. And it looked human from the body up, but the entire thing still looked very like the color of camouflage. So he kept looking at it, and it never made sense to him. And he's like, the same way I kept looking at it, and very, very slowly, but that thing, it's standing there, but at the same time, he says that it felt like a dream. So that thing just dissolved. Like it was there. And he said he was there for about a good 5 minutes or so. He's like, I was stuck there and I couldn't move. And the thing just dissolves. Like it doesn't go away. It doesn't burrow underground or climb the tree that I was standing next to. It just dissolves. And he says that I was released from the grip of fear that I was in. And it just kept running. And I reached the resort, and he couldn't talk to anyone. He said that he had a fever for 6 days after that.
Oh my gosh.
And it kept reaching 102, 103, 102, 103 degrees Celsius is what we use over here. So it was pretty high. The fever was something similar to the symptoms of typhoid fever. So 102, 103. And for 6 days, the guy was in writhing agony.
God.
And he had these constant fever dreams. And this is where the snake thing comes into play. Till this point, he didn't understand what he saw. But in these fever dreams that he had because of this thing that he saw, he kept seeing the Hindu god Shiva, and he kept seeing snakes in his dreams. Again and again, he kept seeing snakes for the next 6 days.
Oh my God.
So this was, like, it spooked me to the point, Shannon, where I didn't want to go inside the forest.
I can understand that.
Like, I was freaked out. I was like, I mean, it's so borderline absurd, and it's so creepy, and it's because when he spoke about this thing, camouflage color and all of that, I wasn't into podcasts or anything, and I was raised in the Christian faith. I was raised in it. Obviously, I'm not, but then I was raised in it. It sounded similar to the serpent in the Garden of Eden, which is what it sounded like to me, like something that was standing next to a tree, and he kept talking about snakes in his dreams after the next few days, and that's what it sounded like to me. Like the serpent of Garden of Eden, or something demonic. It did not sound like a nature spirit or a sprite or something benign. It sounded malevolent, and it sounded something demonic.
I have a question for you, because
Sure.
I got a flash of something. You said that he saw in his dreams the god Shiva. Shiva? How do you say that?
Yes. Yes, Shiva.
Isn't that the statue that's in front of CERN?
Yes, it is.
The particle collider? Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Interesting.
So it's one of the avatars of Shiva. The god itself has more in, if you know about Norse mythology a little bit, Shiva is exactly the same as Odin in its, in the broader spectrum. So just like Thor is like the Hindu god Indra, which is also a god of thunder and lightning, both have red hair and red beards. Both rain thunder from the sky. Similarly, Shiva is a wandering god who is an ascetic, lives inside the forest, is surrounded by the animals of the forest, very similar to Odin, wanderer again. The concept of serpents again comes into play, where culturally serpents are not considered demonic, but rather divine beings in the Indian mythology. So Shiva being one of the trinity of gods, the main one being Brahma, who's the creator of it all. And then there's Vishnu, who's the preserver of everything that exists. And then there is Shiva, who's the destroyer of things. So, and this has taken me a long time, Shannon, because I was raised in the Christian faith. And in the Christian faith, you're taught, let me put it this way, that every other pantheonic god is demonic in some form or the other, right? That's what most Christians are taught in some form or the other. But the more I learned about it, so he has this, Shiva, the god, has this dualistic nature where he has dominant personality traits that are revealed in certain sets. So the sun thing that you see is called Nataraja, which is an avatar of Shiva or an embodiment or a manifestation of him. A different one, not the mainstream one, is a different manifestation. But what is very creepy about the sun one is that Nataraja is dancing. And Nataraja is the dancing god. That's what it literally translates to. Nataraja means the dancing god. But the dance is not some dance of celebration. It's the dance of destruction. It's the dance that Shiva will dance when the world will end. And that is the creepy part, that CERN has something like that. I understand that they were given that by some Indian fellow, but why would they still have it and like display it in the middle of everything, like out there in your face,
right? Not
some obscure corner. That's something that I found disturbing, especially the dance video that they have. Have you seen that one? The one they were dancing and celebrating. And
yes, I did, actually. Yeah, there's all kinds of very strange things going on at CERN.
Yeah, and that fake sacrifice thing. Oh,
yeah. God, I know. What the hell, right? What are they doing over there? And then they're going to shut down, and they're going to put a bigger particle collider in the whole thing, I guess. A bigger, I don't know if it's a battery or whatever you want to call it. Isn't it?
It is. It's absolutely terrifying. And this is something I've been hearing on a lot of podcasts recently, and the more I've heard about this, the more I wouldn't say I buy into it, but I definitely think that there have been microscopic and maybe even macroscopic changes in the world since the CERN thing started. 2008, I think, was it started? When they started it, I think 2008. I don't remember specifically, but then
somewhere around there.
They've been talking about. Yeah, and they've been talking about. I don't obviously believe in Mandela effect entirely, but then there are certain things about it that really make me question a lot of things, and people have started talking about it after post 2008. Like, you didn't have stories like this prior to that, and all of a sudden you have this huge influx of stories where people are talking about they remember things and can't trace memories to them and can't quantify what they believe in by statistical data. And, the Breinstein, whatever, the bears and all of that. But then, so you have all these crazy theories that are popping up. But what I've genuinely seen or believe, Shannon, is, see, I was born in 1990, so not very old, but moving towards it. There has been this. I find it easier to relate, and I don't know about the others, but I find it easier to relate to people born in the 80s and the 70s than I do with the generation that is born after 2000, which is technically closer to my age, but very difficult to relate to people specifically born after 1995. They call them Generation Z or something. There's something so, like, it's very difficult to relate to them. If I look at the trends that they follow from, I'm not saying because every subsequent generation says, oh, I don't understand the younger one, but everything just seems out there in the open and nothing seems like anything has value anymore. Everything just comes and goes in a matter of days. For example, the whole political sphere in US and the political sphere in India as well. We both have people. Let me just put it this way. So I'm sort of in the middle. I'm a centrist or maybe even a classical liberal. I do not understand this new culture of outrage where people are absolutely appalled by everything. You can't have slightly different viewpoints. Everyone is always offended. Everyone is always upset. Everyone has this currency of outrage. Oh, I'm offended. Please give me some more attention. And that is what I mean when I talk about the new generation. It's very difficult to relate to them. I don't know. Maybe it's, I don't know, Shan.
Yeah, no, Ashe, I'll send you something that will make you crack up because, it's something with JP and it's very sarcastic, but he does have one video that talks exactly what you are saying. It talks about that. And it's how to be offended by everything. You're just like, just the fact that you don't know that I'm offended offends me. Like, he's just poking fun.
Who cares? You can be offended all you want. What does it matter to me?
No, that's what I'm saying. This guy pokes fun at those people who are just, all they want to do is be pissed off and offended all day. And you're like, you know what? Just calm the hell down. All right, so
It's like somehow the problems are so great. What are they talking about? Have you seen the previous generations, the things that they went through, the things that they suffered? You've done nothing in your life. What are you offended about?
All they're doing is sitting on their computer and just whining. And that's a whole nother subject though. Okay, so let's jump back into this guy's tale.
Yes,
so
yes,
did
of course,
he mention to you why he thought that he was even seeing that? Like, was he supposed to see that and go through this horrific thing afterward with the fever and the dreams and everything?
See, he wasn't a religious person, but let me put it this way. If he was a religious person, he would probably consider this entire ordeal as something that something of a blessing, let me put it this way.
Oh, okay.
But he wasn't religious.
Okay.
He saw this as something, as perhaps I would saw it as well. He saw this as something traumatic, something unnatural, and something that he should not have witnessed. What he said in his words was, he saw something he should not have seen. So he was an experienced guy, all right, a very genuine fellow. And he said this to me out of care, I guess. But that spooked me out.
It's so dramatic. Yeah. I mean, did he say that he didn't go back to work for a while, or what? Did he mention anything about that?
So you have to understand, these people don't have the privilege of not working. They have to work sometimes all the way till they're 80, because we don't have any benefits by the government. Nothing at all. The government gives us absolutely nothing. So whatever these people get is what they assimilate throughout their life. So they don't... Hello?
Oh, I gotcha.
All right. So these people don't get anything by the government. I thought that my phone vibrated. Just give me a...
No problem.
All right, yeah. So this fellow is... he's got about... I think he's got a son that he has to take care of, a wife that he has... And he used to live over there. So... forest rangers in India, I think over there as well, they live inside the sanctuary. Like they live inside the forest. This guy used to live over there. He's a part-time chef of the facility, and he takes people on guided tours inside the sanctuary the rest of the times, along with all the other ranger responsibilities that are there. One of them being constantly be on the lookout for poachers. No one is hunting very specific birds. No one is chopping down sandalwood. So things like that. So yeah. So he is one of the 16, 17 rangers, but he was the one who was in charge of the cooking and the caretaking of this property along with his other responsibilities. So no, he went back to work after 6 days. He said that still does not go inside the forest in the middle of the night. During the day, he takes someone along.
Oh God. I do not blame him.
And this was during the day, by the way.
Oh,
this experience was during the day. So he obviously goes back inside the forest and he works the same as he used to before, because he cannot afford to live his life in fear and not being able to take care of his family. So he goes there, but he avoids that particular trail specifically. Oh, I'm so sorry. I need to mention this. So this particular trail that we are talking about is also the same trail that the religious pilgrims use for a temple inside the forest.
Oh, interesting.
Now, not that the temple is, not that the temple is of this particular entity or this god. I think the temple is of a female goddess. I've never been that side, so I don't know. But then I think the temple is of a female goddess, and he obviously never mentioned that he saw a female or a male entity. All that he said was he saw an entity. So yeah.
that brings up another question. So you brought up ghost adventures. So sometimes they'll go into a property, and I saw one where they ripped up the carpet or something, and down in the basement there's satanic symbols, and it turns out that, somebody was worshiping Satan. Do you think that, yeah, it is it makes me laugh too. But do you think that it might be possible then that in or around that temple, even though this particular Shiva or the half man half snake was not adorning the temple or anything, do you think that maybe there was some darker stuff going on and they were worshiping something similar to that, and maybe it helps it manifest somehow? I know it sounds kind of out there and crazy, but
no, I completely get it. And I pulled up something before to build this in more of a context. So there's this concept of, you've seen Lord of the Rings, you've seen all these other movies, right?
Yeah.
Right. So we have these races, right? We don't have just the human race. We have elves and we have goblins and all of that existing simultaneously, inhabiting different parts of the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, you have this concept in Indian mythology, which is 3 books combined together. It is the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, and the Puranas. And these predate the Bible and predate Abrahamic religion by about 2 millennia, I think. So these very old texts that speak about the exotic tribes of ancient India. You can Wikipedia this up and you can find a lot of stuff on it in different Hindu-dominated websites as well. But all in all, they speak about, I think, 12 or 15 different races of beings that exist simultaneously to man. And one of those beings is called the Nagas, which are half snake, half humanoid figures. Very reptilian figures, let me put it this way, because not all of them had a lower body of a snake, but all of them had reptilian characteristics. Along with them, they also had something called a yaksha, which is word to word exactly the same as the fair folk of the Scottish and the Irish Isles. Very, very similar. And then they have something called kinners, which is something that is both man and woman at the same time, so hermaphrodite. So some of them were founded in reality, and some of them obviously great mythological ones. For example, they have something called Vanaras, all right, which is, if you've been acquainted with any form of Hindu mythology, the Hindu god Hanuman is a Vanar, which literally means, word by word, it means a monkey man. And it's very similar in appearance and in the ways that it works is very similar to ape-like creatures that we all love and talk about, the Bigfoot and the Yeti. It talks about this race of monkey men who throws giant stones at people. That's what it talks about. All the Vanar legends are that, of giant monkey men, people who could lift up trees and lift up mountains as well sometimes. So it speaks of beings like that. Now, how much of that is related to this part would only be the Naga part, which is a half human, half reptilian being that lives underground, is known to work together with the gods. So is known to work with Shiva especially, which is something I know of from the texts. I don't know about the other gods, but then this race of beings, and this is the only thing that I found interesting about the whole Naga concept. In India, there's also a were snake. Let me put it this way. You have werewolves and you have all sorts of were creatures in India. Yeah, you have something called were snake, especially women, seductresses, found in the forests, and if you follow them, you would get lost. They would take you to their world, which is underground, which is called Naglok, which is an entire world in burrows and caverns inside the earth. And these women always look very voluptuous, so men always follow them to their doom. Very similar to mermaids and the sirens and all of that. But I found this very interesting because which is something, and this is something I recently learned, by the way, a year or so back, this exotic tribe of ancient India concept, because I never knew about the different races the texts talk of. And I found it fascinating, especially the Vanar and the bipedal hominid parallels that you can lay forth, because word by word, that's what the Bigfoot legends are, a very sentient creature that lives inside the forest and often known for throwing stones.
Right.
And the Vanar concept of India is very fascinating, which is something I've been reading about more and more lately. The only problem is we don't have authors who've laid such parallels. So yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love that story. There's so many tie-ins with other subjects too. So I'll be excited to hear what people say about that story. Thank you for sharing that one. Okay, Ash,
very welcome.
What if we jump into your grandfather and his neighbors back in the 50s and the Djinn?
Yes, that's again a very creepy one. Something that I've really tried not to bother much with. But I've heard only second-hand accounts of it mainly. And the only first-hand account was from my grandfather himself. And he told me a couple of times. But what he used to say was, and something that I wrote in the mail, but then something I've learned recently, because I've been talking recently to my mother a lot about the same. And my mother says that the neighbors, yes, were known to have something in their house, possession of it.
Mm-hmm.
But apparently my great grandmother got that particular object that entity was tied to in her house as well, and then things happen, which I'll talk about. But let me start it off with. So my grandfather used to tell us stories of jinns. Now, jinns are not a predominantly Indian legend. Jinns are a Middle Eastern legend and an Islamic legend inherently. And so a little background for jinns. We have human beings, we have angels in Islamic theology, I guess. And then we have in between the jinns. Now, jinn, the literal translation or the meaning of the word is a being that is fire but without smoke.
Mm-hmm.
Which is something I always found fascinating, because that just looks like a ball lightning to me. So a fire without smoke is what a jinn is. Now, in Islamic doctrine, it's said that they first had angels, the highest beings created in the world, and then God created, Allah created, I think. I don't even like using that word, but then, so this entity created these lesser beings that were fire without smoke. That's the physical description of them. And then, so in these beings that he created, these fire without beings created, he had a favorite. His name was Iblis. And then he finally created human beings. Now, the story of Iblis, the Jinn Iblis, is word to word exactly the same as the story of Lucifer in the Christian doctrine. So God created man, and God told to every other creation that he created to bow down before man, because man was created in his image. All the creations bowed down. The angels bowed down. All the jinns bowed down. But then Iblis was one jinn who did not bow down. He told God that these creatures are flawed and they are not better than me. I am your favorite. Why? What he said was, I'm so beautiful. Why should I bow down to these creatures? And God told him, no, bow down and all of that. And there's an argument ensued, and he decided, Iblis decided that, all right, now I'm going to live out the rest of my days tormenting this new creation. In Islamic doctrine, these beings can be, so one of the things that they say is, there are so many jinns in the world that you could not step 1 foot from where you're standing without touching another one's foot. So that's what they believe, that there are so many jinns in the world. And I think there's another word, jinn, jinnat, or something like that. I don't know. But then this is what they say. And what they... the legend of the jinns is very similar, Shannon. If you were to lay parallels, you would think that we're talking about fair folk.
Right.
And not jinn itself. So these things apparently can grant wishes. These things can be tied to objects and bound to objects, and those objects become the conduit of these powers or these entities. And they have a society just like ours, and they're constantly living in their society, and they also like to interact with us, meddle with us. Some like poltergeist, some like to attach themselves to people and remain attached to that person in his her or entire bloodline. So they can be attached to you, and then your son and your daughter and your daughter's daughter and all of that, and they are immortal. Generally, it's considered that they're immortal. Certain people say that their lifespan is 8,000 years. So there's different takes on that.
Right.
I don't know if they can have children or not, but then that's the story. Oh, anyway, my grandfather's story. Back in the 50s, there was a lot of refugees that came to India. This is after India got its independence from the British, from the British. So yes. So a lot of refugees came to India. A lot of people from Afghanistan and a lot of people from other parts of the Middle East came to India as well, seeking a better future. And so the government allotted a lot of land and a lot of pre-constructed societies to these people. And one such family happened to land next to my grandfather's family. My grandfather was young back then, so he was in his teens is what he used to tell us.
Mm-hmm.
So he, along with his mother and his father had, I think my great-grandfather, I think he had passed away when he was young. And my grandfather was the eldest son. So he used to work in his teens and come back home and all of that. But what he used to tell me was his mother, my great-grandmother, was a little, so she was mentally handicapped.
Yeah.
And she used to commune or talk to someone. So they used to live in a 2-story house. The children all used to live downstairs, and the mother used to prefer living upstairs by herself. She used to speak to someone upstairs, so there was no one, obviously. And this had only started happening after the new family had moved in. So back then, and even now, India has a lot of superstitions, but my grandfather got very upset about it. That he saw the pattern. He saw that there were people who moved in, and that's where my mother started going really cuckoo. So what he used to tell us was this new family that moved in would often ask us for household items, sugar, grocery, and all of that.
Right.
And the mother, my great-grandmother, used to come down and scold the children, telling them not to give things to the new people that moved in. This was the very few bouts of senses that she used to have. Other than that, she always used to speak to herself. Right? She never liked these people from the moment they moved in. Speak to herself or speak to something new. They moved in. These are refugees, Shan, without any money of their own, without anything. Everything that they have is what the government gave to them, shelter. And in front of them, they saw that these people started accumulating a lot of wealth all of a sudden. Like they just moved in from a different country, and all of a sudden they have a lot of wealth, and they're doing really good for themselves, better than what these people who've been living here for so long have not been able to do. So perhaps inherent jealousy or perhaps something, but this one night, my grandfather got really drunk, and he stood outside the house of these people. And he started screaming obscenities and things that people do when they're drunk, threw a bottle of something at their house. And my grandfather used to say that I threw a bottle at their house. I screamed and I came back inside. I went to sleep. What he used to say is the next day I went out and I felt someone threw a stone at him. All right. And this is during the day. This is like during the day where there are people. Someone threw a stone at him. Now he looks around and he's baffled that there's no one I can see. 5 to 10 stones come raining down on him from the above, and he looks up and there's no one above because he lives in a 2-story house. The only person above would be his own mother, which I doubt would throw stones and then close the window in such abrupt fashion that you could not even see her hand going down. So he was very like he got creeped out. He was like, okay, what did this happen? So he comes back inside and he's telling his, he had siblings. So he's telling his other brothers, he's got 2 other brothers and 2 sisters. He's telling his brothers and his sisters. And on their wall, there's this, how he used to describe it was, if you ever heard of a bass drum, and if you ever heard of metal drummers playing bass drum, these triplets that do these triplets that happen. That's what he heard on the other side of the wall. And he heard it, he heard it once and he's like, and all the siblings all creeped out. Like, huh? And then it comes again. Like, and they get really weirded out. So they go outside their house and they go I think one of the siblings went to the grandmother upstairs and she's like, did you hear that? Or they spoke about something. And this sound is unexplainable because the houses were not stuck to each other. So their house is there and there's a wall and there's this about 5 to 10 feet of empty land, and then there is the neighbor's house, the people who moved in, the Irani people. And he got really, my grandfather got really freaked out, and he goes outside his house and he somehow he knows, or he feels like this is not normal, and he goes out and he's really upset over what has happened. And he was a devout Christian. So he starts praying outside and he assures his siblings that it's all fine. Nothing will happen. They go back inside after a little while, after they feel like it's better. The mother never came down. The mother never came down with the rest of the family. So they go back and the siblings go back inside. My grandfather goes to his work and he comes back and nothing really happened. Nothing happened for a day, for a year. Nothing happened. After a point of time, after his mother passed away, after my great grandmother passed away, and she passed away under very mysterious circumstances, she was fine. I mean, she had an issue with her head, obviously, but then physically she had no issue. Like, she was perfectly fine. She just passed away one night. No scream, nothing happened, no sort of indicators, no warnings. But she just passed away. The moment she passed away, these people used to live downstairs. Every night they used to smell something burning. Every night, from the moment she passed away, from the next day onwards, or from the day onwards rather.
Wow.
They used to smell something burning. They used to sleep downstairs, and not from her room specifically, but they used to smell burning everywhere. And what happens is, in India, the Christian faith is very intermingled with the Hindu society, because society is Hindu, so it has a lot of say in how it works. So they have the whole concept of leaving the belongings and things of the person that passed away untouched. So they locked her room and they used to live downstairs. There was no reason for them to go up. Every night they had this, they smell this burning thing for a week or so. After a week, my grandfather is like, what if there is something of a short circuit or something inside her room? So he goes up. All the walls are black. Every wall inside her room is black, like char black, like someone burned them. Every wall. Okay. And it leaves, it's burned in the manner where it leaves, so it's not like burned, it just became black. It leaves a residue, right? You touch the wall, it leaves a residue of the black combustion. So my grandfather he knows that this is not normal, and he knows that this is not something that is, that can be explained. So he calls the priest from their parish. He comes and he prays inside the house, and he's like, there's nothing to worry about. He sprinkles his holy water and he goes back. Well, the thing doesn't stop. Every night they still smell something burning, and every night my grandfather dreads living in his own house, and we're talking about people from a lower socioeconomic background, so he can't really afford to sell off the house and just go away and live somewhere else. They're terrified and they leave the room locked. They're like, what my grandfather says, that he thought what he thought was that if I don't bother this room, maybe whatever this thing is will do us no harm, at least physically will do us no harm.
Because that's one of the... can I interrupt you just real quick? So,
of course.
This is fascinating with the walls being black. So besides the walls are blackened, you said there's a residue. What about the other furniture in the room? What about her bed and the trinkets?
There was barely anything.
Okay.
So we're talking about 1950s where people used to sleep on a mattress on the ground.
Uh-huh.
So these things, I mean, the things that are left alone are the clothes of the person, the jewelry of the person. I think a little more context. So the clothes of the person, the jewelry of the person is left intact. Whatever, was it an almirah or a wardrobe, whatever it was that contained all these objects is left intact. You can remove things like chairs and tables and all of that, but the things that the person interacted with on a daily basis, like things that were on their body, jewelry, clothes specifically, these are the things that are left intact for about 7 days, maybe even 40 days in some faiths.
Right. But was any of that stuff burned or damaged at all?
Funny that you should ask, because I don't know, maybe I was naive, but my grandfather passed away about a decade back. And I never really asked him very specifically, whether was the ground burned or what he used to tell me was what he used to tell me. I never really questioned a lot of what he said. Let me put it this way.
Right.
It was just a fascinating ghost story for me, and it used to give me the creeps every time. But every time I used to visit him, I used to be like, "Tell me that story, please."
Yeah.
So I never really dug much deep into it.
Right.
It's only recently, only after I started listening to your podcast and all, that I actually started thinking in retrospect about the things that can be classified under certain things. For example, this. In any other culture would sound like a demonic infestation, but in the Islamic doctrine, it's something that the Djinn leaves, because a Djinn is pure fire. So if it's in a place, it will have physical remnants of its presence. That's what they believed in later, which I'll get to. But then, this is where the crazy starts picking up. So they think that if they leave it alone, no one will bother them. And this is about a month or so after the priest blessed the room. The youngest of my grandfather's sister was to be married to someone. Everything was fine. They lived nearby. The man died. Just died. Out of a sudden, just passed away. Like passed away in his sleep. A man in the prime of his youth, 27, 28 years of age, just passed away. And this is where things really started, physically things started harming them. My grandfather used to tell us that there were times that they would go inside the washroom and turn on because there wasn't a concept of geysers in the 50s. I mean, in India at least it wasn't. So they used to bathe with cold water. So they used to turn on the tap, and the water is cold. The bucket has cold water in it. They put the mug in the bucket and they put the mug on their head. The water feels like it's burning their skin. It feels hot.
Wow.
So this was something that happened a couple of times, and the first few times it happened, my grandfather thought maybe it's only happening to me. And then he asked the other ones, and they were like, yeah, it happened to us as well. So that was something that was happening to everyone. And this is the time where my grandfather he got a job as a logger. So he finally decided that, all right, I can't really live in this house anymore. And things are happening that perhaps in the near future might directly do us some sort of physical harm or the other, but not before. He thought that around this time, he also started experimenting. Experimenting is a far-fetched word, but he also started going to a Pentecostal church. All right. He was in a Catholic church before that, but he started going to a Pentecostal church. And Pentecostals are really big on the whole, the Holy Spirit coming in and people speaking in tongues and all of that. So he called one of these Pentecostal priests to his house as well. Now this priest, I don't know if he was a genuine thing or not, but my grandfather believes that he was the genuine thing, this priest. This priest said that we'll have a whole night fasting prayer, that you'll fast the entire day before and the entire night we'll pray for the deliverance of this. what is so surprising is my grandfather never really mentioned the neighbors again after this, because everything started with them. So why didn't he?
All right.
But anyway, he called this Pentecostal priest, and they started praying. And people outside started knocking on the door and telling them that your house is burning upstairs. There's this fires inside. We can see fires inside. So these people go up. The entire room inside is burning. How can concrete burn is beyond me. But concrete is burning. Right? It wasn't a wooden house. We don't have the concept of wooden houses over here. It's all concrete. So how can concrete burn? I mean, of course, if jet fuel can melt steel beams,
right.
then the concrete is burning. And this preacher is, maybe he was the genuine thing, I don't know, but he's unafraid. And he's like, pray. Touch the walls and pray. And then they're praying. I don't know if it was mind over matter or whether it was prayers that actually worked, but the fire started dying out. None of them were burned. And my grandfather says that none of their hands were burned, but that's what they believed in. They believed in Jesus Christ, and they started praying, and it subsided. Not that the activities went off entirely, but then my grandfather still used to tell us that, you know, every now and then we hear a sound or two upstairs, and sometimes we thought there was a rat or maybe an owl or something that had inhabited the room. There were many rats, so he used to believe that maybe there were vermin or maybe there was something else, but he never really bothered much. And I think about 6 to 7 months later is what he used to tell us. They changed the house. They left the entire locality. That this was in the western part of India, and he came to Delhi finally, and that's where he lived till his last days. But the neighbors and all, because my grandfather was still in touch with the people who were his neighbors and his friends in that age. The neighbors and all used to tell them that these people just kept getting filthy rich, and the next door Iranians, they got filthy rich. They opened a restaurant or something, and then they finally bought a piece of land nearby, and they opened a tourist, a lodge tourist hotel sort of a thing. I mean, they just kept assimilating a lot of wealth. For people who didn't even speak the language, I find it very difficult to believe that it happened of their own sheer will or hard work. I definitely believe there might have been something of all the... I mean, he was talking about all of this when my grandfather was 89 or 88 or something. So obviously his memory might have been fuzzy about a few things, which I understand, but he believed it. He really believed it. And yeah.
It's just like the story of Faust making a deal with the devil, right? He's like, well, I'll give you my soul, but I just want all these worldly things, right?
Yes, precisely, yes. And I think that the Faustian legends are sort of inspired by maybe by the Djinn stories, because in Christianity you don't have, I mean, in biblical theology you don't really have there are no stories of people making deals with the devil. This is all very Islamic in its inception. Deal with, I mean, have you heard of deal with the fair folk and all? I think they exist.
Yeah.
Deal with the fair folk.
Do you remember when Pam was talking about her, it was either, I always get confused if it's her grandmother or great-grandmother.
When she spoke about that satyr.
Yes, and it says, do you want help with that? And they were always taught you never say you want the help, because it's like signing a contract, and then you're in some really deep shit. So it's fascinating.
Me out.
I mean, it is. It really does sound like that's what was going on next door to your great grandfather.
Yeah. Shannon, I in my late teens, I studied. I wanted to be, my mother at least wanted me to be a priest once. So I studied under the Jesuit order, and I wanted to be a Catholic priest. It was a long time back. I was 17, I think. And I really wanted this to be, and then of course I fell in love and all of that. Didn't want to do it. So I was when I was 18 or 19, when everything that happens in the US, in India, it happens now it happens instantaneously because of the internet, but back then it used to happen about 5 years to a decade later. So for example, grunge was pretty big, like Pearl Jam and all were pretty big in the 2000s in India, compared to where it should have been big in the early 90s.
Right.
But it was really big in the 2000s. So anyway, I got into music, and I mean, I still am into music, and I was always fascinated by occult concepts. And I tried it, all right. I have no shame in admitting it because I learned a few lessons or two. I tried it. I tried reading Crowley, and should I bleed this narrative into the story that the tale that I told you of this thing that I saw in the sky?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, let's do that. That's a good idea.
All right. So, I started experimenting with occult concepts. It obviously started benign. It was all Wicca initially, but then I wasn't getting the kicks, I guess, out of it. So I started not experimenting. I started reading a bit of Crowley, and I found it fascinating, but it was too cryptic for me to fathom. So the few things that I understood from his works was one of the first things that happen when you start experimenting with magic as a concept with the CK at the end. There's this synchronicity that happens, right? You start seeing patterns, or things become, you just start seeing patterns. And this is still what most practitioners believe. So I had read somewhere that he was talking about this tale where Aleister Crowley is in a cave or somewhere, and he spoke about this ball of light that came and burst near his leg, and it gave him a burning mark, and but felt a lot like peppermint or something. I don't remember. That's something that he said. And I had read this about like 2 or 3 days before, and then this one day I'm talking to this girlfriend of mine, because of whom I left the Catholic studies that I wanted to do. And I'm talking to her on the phone, and I just happened to look up in the sky, and I see this very stationary ball of light. Very, very stationary. And it immediately catches my gaze, and I'm looking at it. And then all of a sudden it just flies away, and it flies at such a rapid speed that it felt sentient, is how I can put it. It felt like, I was aware of it, and it was aware of me. And that concept that it was aware of me really spooked me out. But I really didn't think much into it. I actually thought that, all right, this is cool. I am walking on the synchronicity highway, and I'm seeing the patterns. And I thought, wow, this is great. This is great. But then, of course, later on, when you're experimenting with these things, I had a lot of sleep paralysis because maybe even reading things can sometimes open gateways. So I was having a lot of sleep paralysis, and that really creeped me out. So I started weaning myself off it. But in 2012, and this is what I really, because this was my first experience, my personal one. This is 2012 when I'm sitting with a few friends, and we're on the terrace of this friend of mine. There's my girlfriend over there and 2 other people. And I've never been a pothead, though I look like one because I have long hair, but I've never been a pothead. And I just, like, it's never been something that I've enjoyed. I've always had a panic attack from it. So these people are smoking pot, and I'm an incessant, I can drink a lot without showing any signs of intoxication. So I'm drinking a lot, and these people are smoking their pot, and we're on the terrace, and there's no build up to this. It just happened out of the blue. So these people are smoking their pot, and all of them are like, yeah, try this. And I'm like, I can't, because I know I'll freak out, and who's going to babysit me? No, let me drink my alcohol.
Yeah.
Well, I freak out. I think people are out to kill me, Shannon. I go inside in a shell. I sit in a fetal position and I'm like,
no,
please just
can
get
I just say,
away.
when I read your email, it made me crack up. And, because I am exactly like you, because I have once in my life, I have tried pot, okay? And this was going on 20 years ago now. It was when I was, very cliche, but I was living outside of Seattle. There you go. But I got such a bad panic attack and I was so paranoid that I'm like, why the hell would anyone think this is fun? This sucks. I couldn't wait until it was over and I've never touched it again. I was eating ice cream and I'm like, just eat your ice cream and shut up. Just eat your ice cream and shut up. Like I had to keep saying that in my mind.
Everyone is looking at you. Everyone is out to kill you.
Oh yeah, it's horrible. I'm like, who's here? Who's there? Who's looking at me?
Your heart is stopping.
It's horrible. Anyway, yeah, I when I read that, I was like, dude, that is exactly like me.
I have never enjoyed that thing, and I have people over here. So the pot culture is really big in India because all the Hindu mythology gods are known for smoking pot. So everyone has a free pass to, all right, let's smoke pot because the gods smoked it. Yeah, right, all right. So they all smoke pot, and they think it's really cool and edgy, and it's so annoying, so irritating. So these people are smoking their pot. I know. The last time, Shannon, I smoked pot and I was with my girlfriend and she was like, no, let's try it. So I smoked pot and I'm sitting next to her. She's sitting right next to me and she says something. And I'm like, what did you say? And this is where the thing, like, I started getting really, really high and like, what did you say? And she's like, nothing. And I had tears in my eyes.
What? What do you mean
Don't
you
lie to
didn't
me.
say anything?
Yeah. I'm crying like a child and I'm like, I know you're out to kill me. You are those people standing outside the door, aren't you? And she's like, no, I'm not trying to kill anyone. I'm like, you and those people standing outside the door, those goddamn people are all out to kill me. And she's freaking out. She doesn't know what to do anymore.
And then that adds to your freaking out, right? So it's just like a cycle of just horror. It's terrible.
Just get away from me. Leave me alone. I kept thinking that my heart was stopping and I really need to concentrate on my heart beating because if I don't concentrate, my heart is going to stop.
Explode.
I'm going to die.
Yeah.
Oh
my gosh, Ash, that is so funny. It's exactly how I am. That one time, that's all it took. And I was like, never again, not touching that crap. It's not worth it.
See, people kept telling me that maybe you'll just grow into it. So I tried it a couple of times and every time it was worse than the last time.
Right, you're like, why do I listen to anybody but myself? I'm just done with it.
Alcohol is good enough for me. Just give me alcohol. That's good enough.
Oh, right? Where's the Jack or the Jim Beam? We're not crazy on that stuff. Oh my god.
You aren't?
Well, I mean, it takes a lot. You know. It's just all about sipping it, you know, you don't mix it or anything. You just nice, no ice, neat, just sip on it, you know.
So over here it's fairly different. People over here cannot have something neat. They need something. No, they can't. It's not in their nature.
What do they like to? So they put like Coke in it, like Coca-Cola or Pepsi.
I have it with ice. People have it with Coke.
Okay.
People have it with soda. People have it with water.
I mean, that's really popular here. I'm not saying that it's not. That's definitely a huge thing here, is to mix it or Jack on ice or whatever. But just saying, for me personally, I like it neat. Nice and room temperature.
It's got a very distinct flavor. If you aren't savoring it, what's the point of it?
Right. Yeah,
it's just like any other alcohol otherwise.
Yeah. Oh god, that's too funny about the weed. That's, oh my gosh. I'm right there with you, buddy. Alright, so yeah, continue with you guys up on the terrace.
So we're sitting on the terrace and, you know, when people smoke weed and they all of a sudden get really, like this very artificial deep, like, I'm so deep. God, I'm so deep. So one of these fellows is like, you know what would be better if we listen to some sort of stupid EDM trance music that they played. And I remember I was cringing about the fact that, no, this is not music. And they're really into that trip. So they're like, please don't ruin this for us. I'm like, all right, I'll shut up. I'll just drink my drink. So I'm drinking. And this guy plays some music and it's trippy, so they're enjoying it. And I'm like, God, where am I stuck? So I'm looking at them and inside my head, I'm really laughing myself off. I'm like, look at them, such pretending. idiots, and like cursing them. And then all of a sudden, I have this, and I can't really say there was an urge or anything. I felt like I was conscious entirely, and I looked up in my consciousness. When I look back, I think something wanted me to look up, but I think I was entirely in control of my actions. So I looked up of my own accord. But I look up, and there's this very slow moving ball of light in the sky. And what really got me off guard is I couldn't really tell how far up it was or how close it was. Like my depth perception for this object was way off. I couldn't understand. But I knew that it was close. At the same time, it felt like it was in space all the way up with the stars. This thing is moving fairly slow. And my initial guess is, I think to myself, it's a shooting star. I also think to myself, maybe a Chinese lantern. And it might not have moved much, maybe 4 seconds or so, 5 seconds. And it stopped. And it just stops in midair. I didn't have that overwhelming fear. Not instantly, at least. It didn't happen instantly. And there was this, and I've heard a lot of people say this, but there was this certain sense of connection, which is when I admitted to myself or realized that this thing is looking at me. And that freaked me out. Like that really threw me off. I did not know what to do. And I'm transfixed looking at this thing. And I think maybe it's descending. Maybe it's coming close to me. But I'm so transfixed by it. And it's not a very long time. Maybe, I don't even remember. I think 10, 20 seconds is what this might have happened for. But then it looked like it had moved close enough, and it was about 100, maybe 150 feet vertically up from my head. And inside the moment, I realized, Shannon, that what I'm looking at is looking back at me. And this is something I felt inside. I knew that there was a certain sense of dread that came over me, that I knew I should not have looked up. And I'm so transfixed, and this thing is descending. The moment I have this, I wouldn't even call it a scream, but when I'm scared, so if you know, my voice is a little on the heavier side. So it's this grunt sort of a thing. So this sigh grunt, and this is the sound that finally came out of my mouth after being frozen what felt like an eternity. This thing took horizontally off. Like it took off like something really fast. Like it must have been going 100, 200 kilometers per minute. That's how fast this thing moved horizontally across, swoosh, and it just vanished. And so I'm so terrified of this entire experience that these people are broken out of their, their trip, and they're obviously very, very slow right now. They don't realize what's happening. In that panic, I remember I held my girlfriend's hand, and she screamed and backed away from me like I was a stranger, or I was something that she should not have seen, the same way I saw something that I should not have seen. And she backed away, and she started crying on the shoulder of this one guy who had been trying to woo her for a very long time. And they're looking at me like I did something wrong. Like all I did was scream. I didn't even tell you what happened. And so he's comforting her, and this other fellow who's very sympathetic to my plight comes up to me, and he's like, "What happened?" And I'm telling them all sitting like barely a foot across from each other. So I tell him that I saw something in the sky, and I tell him as it is, word to word. And They just scoff at the idea and they're like, secondhand, maybe you got high because of the secondhand smoke. And I'm like, I know what I saw and I'm in my senses. And this is why I told you about the alcohol tolerance. I'm fairly tolerant to alcohol. So I can have a good 7 pegs or so, 30 to 60 ml each, doesn't matter. And only start to show signs of intoxication. So when this happened, I was only down about 3 pegs. So it's nothing for me. I know my own capacity and I know when to stop. So this girlfriend of mine back then, she's freaked out. She's screaming and this other person is comforting her. And I feel really left out. I feel like I saw something and no one is, bothering to listen, scoffing at the idea. All I remember after this is I was freaked out. I couldn't sleep for the next day or two. And in a week, this girlfriend of mine back then was off. She used to tell everyone that when I touched her, when she felt electrocuted, when she felt like someone had run a bolt of electricity through her, she also looked at me and she saw just white. Like, I'm like, all right, maybe you were high. That's why. But she started weaning herself off me, and within a week she was gone. And I have no contact with her or anything. And I for a very long time, I felt like that thing, whatever I saw, had something to do with her just going off. Maybe it was just time or maybe something, but then the timing was just so precise and apt. Because we had done this 1,000 times before. She had smoked up and I had drank myself to sleep. We had done this 1,000 times before. So maybe it was time for it to end, but then it happened like a week after this. So that really, and she used to avoid me like the plague. We used to work in the same place. So I used to see her, but she used to avoid me after this. Like the next day onwards. Yeah, she doesn't know me. She doesn't know me at all from the next day onwards. I call her. There's one time she picked up the phone and I tell her that I care and all of that. And she's like, I can't do it. So I'm like, all right, which is understandable. And it wasn't like I was very emotionally invested either. So it wasn't very difficult for me to get over it. It barely took about a month or less maybe. But what really stuck with me was how alone I felt in the following days, where I saw something, and I saw something in the presence of people who I know were doped out of their senses, but in the presence of people. So it wasn't like I was taking a long stroll in the night and saw something, so I had only myself to deal with. I saw where there were people along with me. I'm not expecting people to sympathize with the plight, but the very fact that it happened while there were people present is scarier than something that would happen when you're alone, perhaps.
Well, especially her reaction. So you said that you grabbed her hand and she felt like she had got some sort of an electric shock, but then when she looked at you, it was almost like she saw somebody else or something in your face.
She saw something that was just white, is what she used to say. And this is the thing that really bugged me for a very long time, because I really wanted to ask her, what? Can you describe what you saw? But she just cut off from me entirely. Didn't know what to do with it. I thought, so she was really into that very crappy movie franchise that shows vampires as sparkly creatures. I remember that.
I was just laughing about that last night.
Yes. But that movie ruined everything. Vampires were supposed to be the Lost Boys, an interview with the vampire. What is this nonsense?
Exactly. Thank you for mentioning Interview with the Vampire. That is how it's supposed to be. It's this sparkly shit. Yeah.
Have you heard about the TV series Anne Rice is working on?
No.
No, she's working on an interview with the Vampire Chronicles TV series. I just hope they don't ruin it.
Oh,
she's working on it.
That's amazing. Yes.
It
do it
really
right. She does it right.
She does.
Stephanie Meyer or whatever wrote the Twilight series.
Oh,
no good.
God.
Sorry.
And the things that Twilight offshot into, that garbage piece of erotica that a lot of women were reading. What was it called? 50 Shades of Grey or something?
Oh man, yeah. In fact, 50 Shades Darker has just come out on demand. And I'm like, oh, they're just making bank off all of those movies right now.
I know. There's something milking the cow right now.
Oh, they're so milking it, buddy. I mean, as much as they possibly can. Yeah, it would be interesting to be able to talk to her and just say, what exactly scared you so bad?
Oh, the girl, right.
Yeah.
Yes. So she lives in Dubai now, from what I know, and she's working in Dubai. But she was. So let me put it this way: she was more in love with me than I was with her, and this is the part that really bothered me, because for her, I was the unconventional boyfriend that she wanted, because most Indian men back then in 2012, 2001 were so there's a very big gym craze in India, and there's very conventional looking fellows, the short hair and the very toned out bodies and all of that. And I was in her words, I was the wild one. I was the one with the long hair, and I was the one who was going inside forests. And because these things are not common, like people over there in the US, it's very common for people to go inside the forest and camp and all of that. I was the non-conformist one, let me put it this way. So she really dug the idea, and that's why we got together, because she really liked me, and I was young, so I said no to no one back then. But then, so she was really in love with me to the point where, every other day she had friends over, and she would be like, please come over. You can talk to them and tell them about what you do and the work that you do and all of that. And it was all very interesting for them. Everyone liked to know, all right, this guy works this guy does this guy's a naturalist, this guy works in the field, and he knows a lot of animals and all of that. So it was, I was for a moment for her, something that she wanted in her life always, some sort of a break from the traditional concepts of what her life was before. She was always in a protected household and all of that. So it was all very new for her to have someone to call her own and who wasn't like the others. So she was really into the idea of it all. I don't know how much of it was just the idea and how much of it was more emotional investment, but she was really into the idea. Hence, for her to go completely cold after this happened is something that I never really understood.
How long were you guys together before this happened?
About a year, I think. 1 year.
Yeah, the timing at the very least is of interest.
Yes, it was. Even odder because around the same time we had decided, a few months before, we had decided that we'll leave the job where we were working, and I will go back entirely into my field of work, and she will try to start studying again and do a course or something. So, there were very minute and mundane, but there were future ideas that we had. So it wasn't like, all right, let's just do this and then get it over with. So it had some sort of, the concept of future idea was there. So yeah. So that was strange. Yeah. When she said that she saw a white thing. So this is what I was telling you. So she was really into the whole Twilight and all of that. So when she said white thing, I honestly bluffed, and I honestly did not think much of it, because I thought she was tripping, and maybe she was thinking of something, and she superimposed whatever she was thinking inside her mind to what she saw visually. So it was not something that I paid a lot of heed to, but it's only after I started reading about UFO lore and lights in the sky and all of that is when I started thinking that maybe what she saw, and I'm not saying it was a gray or anything, but maybe what she saw was something genuine and not influenced by the substance that she had smoked. Maybe. Or maybe it was the substance she smoked. Either way, the timing of her going cold is very odd.
Yeah, that's a very strange story, especially the way that the light was moving. Did it have any color to it at all, Ashe?
I think, and I think in retrospect, I think it was green, but I can't be sure because all I was looking at was transfixed by the way it was moving. I know it looked like it was the size of a football or a basketball or football. It looked that size. It did not look bigger. It did not look like a craft. It did not look material. It looked like a ball of light, which is precisely what it looked like. And there was one thing that I found very strange about it. There was like stars and all, you can see rays, right? You can see rays, and when you draw a star, you draw a cross and a ball in the middle, right? So the cross is supposed to be the rays. And when you visually look at stars as well, you look through a telescope or anything, you see rays around a ball of light. But this thing did not have any rays. Like, it did not emanate anything. It just looked like a ball of light without emanating any light, is how I can put it, I guess.
Well, and that whole sentient thing, and didn't you say you felt so terrified once you realized that it was kind of saw you? Yeah.
That dread, that, like, in the pit of my stomach, I felt this thing rise up, and I can sometimes be afraid of things, but on an average, I'm not the kind of fellow who is. Like, I can hear a bump in the night and walk out and be all right. Who's there? Just come out. I'm not the kind who would cover myself with bed sheets and say, all right, I don't want to think about it. But this was something that it terrified me. I was filled with dread. I knew, when I knew that thing looked at me, when I knew that there was a connection made, oh God, that creeped me out. I was paralyzed. I could not move. I was at that whim's mercy. Whatever that thing was, if it wanted to do something to me, it would have, because these people were already with their eyes closed and enjoying their trippy music and enjoying
AKA crappy music. Yeah.
Oh, they were listening to EDM, like din 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 din. God, it's so annoying.
Yeah, they call it trance because you want to go in a trance and then knock yourself out with like a 2x4 or something, or run into a wall just so you don't have to hear it anymore. I think that's what, like, you should go to Vegas and see all these quote unquote resident DJs. That's all they play. And I'm like, oh, you're not going to catch me dead in a nightclub.
I don't even know what a DJ does.
Can you imagine?
I've spent talented artists out there in the world who get nothing in life, don't get the money that they deserve, don't get the views they deserve or the recognition that they deserve. And then you have these people like DJ Khaled and all walk into a pub with 2,000 kilos of gold around their neck and talking about, I'm going to do this. And what are you going to do? Just shut up and sit in a corner. You don't deserve to exist. Please go away.
Makes me really sick when I start to hear stuff like that. I'm like, this is the most asinine thing. And they're making millions and millions and millions of dollars.
In that aspect. Yeah. I mean, of course, every subsequent generation had crappy music, but then I would still say that the pop that was there in the 90s still had some substance than the pop that is there today. Everything that is pushed out and shoved down your throats, everything that is produced by the mainstream media, everything, every concept of art, every concept of music, everything is just so watered down and appealing only to the carnal senses of humanity and nothing else. There is nothing in it, no substance, nothing. Every time I go and go on YouTube and watch the trending videos, it's crap. It's absolute shit.
Yeah,
there's nothing in it.
There's SiriusXM has a channel that's called Lithium, and it's basically all the 90s stuff. So it's like Alice in Chains, Stone Temple Pilots, that stuff I love. That's some of my favorite stuff. I know. They don't make anything like that anymore.
Precisely, and everything is so artificially generated. I think what they do today is even talented musicians, they create a riff or they create a song and they put it inside the computer and they let the computer decide what it wants to do with it, and then they shove it out and people just gorge it up like vomit from the people in power. Yeah? It's insane.
It's like cattle. Remember cattle?
I know, sheeple as much as sheeple.
Sheeple, yeah, that's the perfect term for it. Okay, so I'm super excited about this story. This is the one that I've been kind of teasing everybody, and I'm not going to do any lead-ins or lead you in any way as far as the things that I've been saying about it, unless you've already heard my remarks about. Did you hear any of the latest episodes where I was saying that I've been talking to a guy from India. He's going to come on.
You spoke about the
did you hear what I was
with
saying?
Someone recently, right?
Yes.
Yes, the quiet zone, right?
I wasn't sure. So there you go. So I already led you, and I didn't mean to, but I was probably sure that you may or may not have heard me mention you coming on. So okay. So this is only a few years back, right?
I follow. Yes. This is about, I think, last year. I think last year actually. Wait just a second. This is 2014. So yeah, fairly recent. Yeah. So cool. 3 years ago. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, go for it. I'm super excited about this one.
All right. So I'm a naturalist, which I've already spoken about, and there's this. Again, this is a wetland area, which is sort of an urban forest. So it's not far away from society. It's not like it's out in the middle of nowhere. It's on the outskirts of a city. And I wouldn't really call it outskirts either, because it's very close to an airport. So, like, there is transportation available if you reach the highway. There's always people. In India, the worst thing there is traffic. So there's always 1,000 cars that you can find the moment you exit from the sanctuary. And the sanctuary is not very big. It's about 4.5 kilometers square. I don't know how much it translates into miles. Miles, I think, doubles around, I think. So about 8 square mile or something. So this is not a very big area, but it's a protected area, and it's protected because you have very specific cranes that visit over here. Saras cranes and flamingos and a lot of different birds, but it has a lot of exotic birds. So no wild animals. They have an antelope species and nothing else. So we were here, on the other hand, for sand boas, because the water level depleted in this wetland. So we were here to see how the sand boas are faring. We were actually here for a census, but we also wanted to see how they were faring because the water level is depleting entirely. So let me explain how the place looks. One main water body in the middle, surrounded by land on all the sides. So like a donut, with the middle of the donut being water and the rest of the donut being very dense vegetation because it's a wetland. Again, not very tall trees, but very broad and very canopied area. So if the donut in the middle with the water, the hole being the water, and on the circumference of the hole is very tall grass called taifa, which is about, the grass can be really, really tall, sometimes 11, 14, 15 feet tall. So very tall grass, and it's very, it can really cut you. The grass is very sharp on the edges. So that, and then once the grass area ends, somewhere in the middle of the donut, and then it's dense forest without any sunlight reaching. I mean, very little sunlight reaching. So all thorny and thistly, very, 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 very inhospitable for people to walk into, not the kind of bush that you would walk into. So we are here for sand boas. The water hole in the middle has depleted of water. There is no water. It's all dried up. And we were here to check that. We were here to check the population of the sand boas. And we're all standing, and I'm not alone, all right? So there are about, I think in total there were about 12 people, 12, 13 people. A few of them were volunteers. I'm not really sure, but I think 12 people in total. I was leading the study, so I had to take care of everyone and how everyone is doing and all of that. So we're there, and I am standing in the canopied area, the water being in the middle. I'm standing in the canopied area, so on the outskirts of the donut. And we're talking, and we're standing in a clearing. This clearing leads into the grass that I was talking about, the taifa grass, which is 11, 12 feet tall. So I took we took a few minutes searching here and there. We were looking for very dry soil to see if there were any boas over there or not. And I'm I'm a field man, so I know the brush very well. We are on flattened land right now, and in the canopy of the trees, and I start walking away. I'm on the borders of the grass, taifa, and the land, and I just very casually and not without I didn't think much. I just walked into the grass, taifa, and this is summers, so it's fairly dry. So I walk into it, and it's not like you can't walk into it altogether. So there are antelope, as I mentioned. So antelopes regularly go through this grass. So there are these bent grass natural ways that have been made, and I was on one such way. So I'm walking very casually, and not to look for boars or anything. I don't think I was thinking about looking for boars or anything. I just very casually. Sometimes when you're in the forest, you walk, you explore it for the leisure of it and not for work, and that's what I felt like, the leisure of it. So I'm walking, and these people are not following me; they're behind me in the clearing where they're looking for boars. I keep walking. I don't walk a lot. I think a few steps. I don't know, maybe 50, 20, 30 steps, something like that. I don't remember, but a few steps, not a lot. And I can see the watchtower, because that was my point of reference, that I can see the watchtower. And this watchtower is fairly tall. So the watchtower is about, I think it's 24, 23 feet is what it is. It's a tall watchtower, and it towers above the grass, the blades. I can see it. I can see it very, very close to me. I think it was to my left. I think it was to my left or something. I can see it very clearly. And there's two people who are on the watchtower already. All right. And the watchtower, the way to the watchtower is not through the grass that I came through. It's from the main area that I was in. So it's a very clear way to the watchtower, not very far. So there are these two people, is guy and girl, on the watchtower. And I can see them to my left. Getting the creeps every time. So I'm there, and I'm in the grass, obviously, but I'm also in an area where my shoulders have about a feet or two more space where no grass would touch them. So I'm in a small, very, very small clearing where I can stand without the grass touching me. Right? I can see the watchtower to my left. I wouldn't say I got any feeling, because I honestly didn't, and I would lie if I say I got a feeling. It would just me saying, trying to build up to something, which I won't try to. I'll just say it as it was. So, these people who are standing there are talking to each other, and the girl is leaned on the railing of the watchtower, and they're looking in my direction. And not because I feel lost or anything, but because they're looking in my direction, I think that I'll just wave to them. So I wave to them. And they don't wave back. So I'm like, that's strange, that's rude. Would you not do that? Because what I visually see is them looking towards me. But they're not waving back. I wave a couple of times. They're not responding. So I think, all right, when you come down from there, I'll talk to you. I turn back. I start walking the same way as I came. This is a way that the antelope have gone through 1,000 times. The grass is bent, even though the grass is overgrown on the sides, and you can't see precisely what is in front of you. But when you're walking, you can still see the grass under your feet is bent. So you know that you are on the same path that you came in. So I'm walking, and I've worked in the woods for a very long time. So I know that I know how to retrace my steps, which is what a lot of people told me that maybe you didn't know, but I know where I was walking.
Mm-hmm.
Not overconfident about it, but confident enough in my abilities to know. So I'm walking, and more than 20, 50, 30, 70, I don't know how many steps. I just kept walking, and I'm not reaching the clearing. And it didn't really freak me out or anything initially, because I honestly believed that I was lost, or that I had taken a wrong turn or something. And so I'm walking, and I know that this is the path that I came in from, so it has to be the path. And it's not like, Shannon, it's not like I'm miles inside the woods. I'm barely steps away from where I was. So it really started, now it started freaking me out. I was just getting a little agitated. I looked to the left again, and the tower is still there, and it looked like I'm almost around the same corner, though I've walked quite a distance. And it's difficult to perceive the depth of an object where your direct field of view is being obstructed by such tall glass. So I understand that, but it still didn't feel like the amount of steps I had walked. So I look back to these people again, and I'm waving to them, and they're still standing there and still talking to each other. This must have gone on for about 5-7 minutes or so. And I'm waving to these people. They're still freaked out. And in my head, though I was freaking out, but I could not admit to being freaking out, and I didn't want to scream out to them or call them out, because that would mean that they were doubting. I mean, people would doubt my ability to lead a small. This was the first time I was leading a study, so maybe caught up in my ego or maybe something. But I didn't think that that's something I should do. I was being controlled by my own insecurities, and I didn't want to do that. So I keep looking at these people, and I think that I should walk towards the direction of the watchtower. So that's what I do. I kept pushing towards the direction of the watchtower, because I can see that watchtower in my field of view. And I'm walking towards the watchtower. I see it right above me on the left side. And I turn left. I start walking towards the watchtower. And it's like the bush, the grass is so dense. This side, it's so dense that if I walk into it, like there's no animal pathway over here, and I can see the watchtower so close to me, like I could extend a very long stick, 10 to 20 feet stick, and I could whack these people on their head, the ones that were standing over there and not paying attention. So it wasn't, I know the watchtower is right in front of me. I see it. I see its shadow falling on the other side, not towards me, because it was around afternoon or something, but it was falling on the other side. But I could see. It wasn't like, a lot of people say that they felt like they were in another plane or something. I didn't feel that. I felt like I was there. I felt like I was right there. I did not feel like I was being obstructed or obscured by something or someone. I felt like I was there. I was there because I was there. So I can see physical effects of me being there. Like when I was walking, the grass was breaking beneath my feet. When I was touching, it was moving. It wasn't like, I just entered another dimension or something, which is what I wanted to believe in later. But then that's not what I felt like, because there were very physical reactions to what I was doing. So I control my ego, let me put it this way. And I did call out to them, but they still didn't respond. I called out the name. So one of the person that was standing over there, his name is Abhijit, and I called out his name. I really don't have the kind of voice that you would not hear. It wasn't like the forest was teeming with so much bird life that you couldn't hear anything else. It was fairly quiet. It was the afternoon. You don't have a lot of animals out in the afternoon. They're all resting. So I call out and he doesn't respond. And like when this happened, and this was 2016, not 2014. This was 2016. This was recent. When this happened, this is when I felt, still would not say that I felt in a different state of awareness, but it definitely had a very dreamlike feel to it, very, very surreal. Dreamlike, it felt like what you feel when you're in that half asleep, half awake state where you feel almost like you're floating in this world and not you don't have full control over your motor skills. That's what it felt like. It felt very alien. I felt very detached from my own thoughts. I felt very detached. It felt a lot like meditation and prayer as well. Let me put it this way. It felt like you weren't in entire control of your motor skills, and you were simply there. Like you were simply there. Like I thought 1,000 different things, but again, I wasn't paralyzed or anything. I wasn't freaked out to the point where I would lose all control of motor skills, but it just felt very dreamlike. That's how I can put it. It just felt very dreamlike. You're not like you're just observing something happening, and it's not happening to you, if that makes sense.
And you also mentioned in the email that it was a little quieter when all this was going on that maybe it should have been.
Yes, the forest was unnaturally quiet, but that's something that I'm trying to make sense. Maybe it was the afternoon time where the animals are not as active, but it was definitely there was no. So this place is next to an airport. I did not. Generally, what happens is every 5 to 10 minutes you hear a flight take off. So I didn't hear of any airplane flight take off. Also, this place is next to. So there's an airport on the left hand side. There's this place, the sanctuary, and inside the sanctuary, which was complete disregard of environmental concerns, but there are high tension wires that transport electricity or something. And there's this constant static in the air, like zrrr, there's this constant static in the air that you can hear all the time, regardless whether it's 3 a.m. or during the day. All right, these are high tension wires. Maybe I didn't pay attention to it because I was freaked out, but I did not hear that. I also did not hear any birds. I did not hear, these people were talking and they were talking to each other, and I wasn't very far away from them at this point. I was very far away from them a few minutes ago where I had not started traversing through the grass. But this point I was fairly close to the watchtower. So I know they were talking, but I did not hear what they were talking about.
How many times did you call his name?
Plenty of times. I lost track.
Wow.
I remember the first 2 times were the most difficult ones because I felt like, all right, I'm going to be a butt of all jokes for these people.
Yeah.
But after that, I called out a couple of times. I think about 5-6 times in total must have, yes.
And neither one of them flinched. They didn't look over.
They didn't look
up. Wow. Okay.
Nothing. I didn't exist for them. Either they were so engrossed in their talks that they didn't bother, or they didn't see me. And that is the terrifying possibility, that they did not see me and they did not hear me. Again, I come back to the whole, the incident of the flying light that I spoke about. Things happening to you when you're alone might be terrifying to you, but things happening to you when there are people there are even more terrifying, because that does not leave anything safe, any place safe.
Right.
And so these people don't see me, and now I'm freaking out. in this almost dream-like state. As much as I kept my ego aside, Shannon, and I called out his name, and maybe I could have made a more effort, and maybe I should have screamed. I definitely remember shouting his name twice, thrice, maybe even 4 times. But maybe I should have screamed. Maybe that would have changed things, but maybe that would not have either.
And Ash, the other thing is, you're the boss out there at that point in time, so it wouldn't have been smart to just ignore you, right?
I would have been a butt of all jokes. They would have made fun of me for till time immemorial. I had to. By this point, Shannon, honestly, I had lost the care for that. By this, when I had already said his name, that's what I said. The first 2-3 times calling out to someone was difficult, calling out to that person. But after that, when I shouted his name, it was comparatively much more easier than the first few times. I think I might have, if I wanted to, I could have screamed and called for this person, but I didn't do that. I screamed, I shouted enough that if it was me on the watchtower and I was about 40-50 feet away from me, I would have still heard myself. If I was 100 feet away, I've still heard myself if I was on the watchtower instead of these 2 people. So it doesn't make sense to me, and it doesn't make rational sense to me as much as I wanted to, that this was something that happened because of my lack of the audible sound that I could make from my mouth, because I made enough sounds for them to notice. And these people, again, Shannon, these people are also people who've been working in the field. If you know, and I'm sure you do, because you travel quite a bit as well, and you are acquainted with people who work in and around the forest. But when you work in and around the forest, you sort of develop this secondhand skill where the slightest of noises are things that you pay attention to in the forest.
Right.
Because that's how you're supposed, that's your work. That's your job. So the fact that these people could not hear me is just unbelievable to me. No matter how rationally I can twist the argument around and say, all right, maybe because of this, maybe because of this. No, there was no plane that obstructed or obscured my voice. Nothing flew overhead. They didn't have music in their ears because they were talking to each other. So it wasn't like they couldn't hear me because of that. It just doesn't make sense to me, Shannon. So now that I'm freaking out, I don't know what to do, and worried enough to almost be on the brink of being in this state of anger. And people who are very quick to anger understand that the moment it starts building up, and that frustration when it starts building up, sort of cloud your own judgment. So I try to distract my own mind from what is happening. I mean, I'm aware of what is happening, but I try to distract myself from being too overworked by it by taking out a cigarette from my pocket and lighting it. I take the first few puffs of the nicotine and I'm like, all right, let me just jump into the grass. And this is like a suicide mission. If I jump into the grass, I'm going to have cuts and bruises all over my body if I do that. Which I did. I had partial ones, not very big ones. But I'm standing here and I know that this is the path that I came from. And I know that jumping right ahead of me in the bush, the one that leads to the watchtower, is entirely futile because this is so thick. It hasn't had an animal pass through it. It hasn't had anything pass through it. I don't have the kind of hide that I'm supposed to have to jump through something like this. So I know that jumping through this is a very, very stupid decision, regardless of what state I am in or not. So I retrace my steps. I walk a few steps back. I walk towards the place that I came from. I can still see the path because that path never never vanished. The path always existed. So I walk towards the path and I can see that I'm being obstructed by this bush, and I know technically the clearing should be on the other side. So I jump headfirst into it. Like, all right, let's just do this. No covering, nothing. Jump into it, and I'm stuck in it, but not enough that it's not like a swamp or anything, because it's a dry land, which is something I've always thanked the stars for, that if this would have been in any other season where there was water and the land was marshy, I would not have been able to get out of that place. The mere fact that the land was dry and I could place my foot on something and push myself was enough to get me out of there. So I I walked right into the bushes, this grass, and I pushed through. And I remember I had this very sharp one that went in my cheek. A few of them went in my hands. So I had already started sort of regretting this decision, but I take a few steps forward and like sort of stuck, but not stuck, because you can still get out of it. You know that it's just dry grass, so you can get out of it. So I push and I come out to the same place where I went in from. The exact same clearing, the exact same opening. It's the same place that, almost the same place, a few steps, give or take, from the place where I entered. But I am there. There are people. I can talk to these people. These people can hear me fine. And I went to the watchtower after this, which is something I don't think I wrote in the mail. But I went to the watchtower. I climbed on the watchtower. And I looked for the place that I think I might have been in when I was there a few minutes ago. I could see the place. That place was there. I have no logical explanation of why I could not get out of this zone, why these people could not hear me, the quietness of the forest. And yes, something that I also find worthwhile mentioning, maybe it was the fear or maybe it was the paranoia, but then the moment I was out of this area, everything was back to normal. Everything, I wouldn't say it felt like waking from a dream, but it definitely felt like going from your room to outside with the external environmental noises that were still there inside your room, but were obstructed by your walls and your doors and all that. So they were still faintly there, but the moment you go out and everything is just, it overpowers your senses. So, and everything is there. All the noises, everything is there, which is not something I consciously thought about back then. I was just relieved to be out of it. But later on, when I came back home the same day, I did think about it, and I was like, well, that's strange. I came out of that place and everything was normal. Audibly, everything was normal. Visually, everything was normal. The people were normal. It wasn't like I came out in some other universe where people had fingers for noses or something. Everything was normal. So that was the strangest thing, and it has done two things for me. A lot of people say that they get deterred or entirely give up on the fact of venturing into woods. It's worked the other way around for me. I've really liked going to the woods alone more than I did before. Like in the last 1 year, I've traveled to about 23 places. I don't do a regular job anymore, so I'm travel at my leisure. So I've been to 23 places at my leisure. I don't feel all that. I've never really thought much into it. Now that we're talking, you're the first person I'm actually talking to about this. So mind my ramblings. But then, in the past 1 year, I've actually enjoyed the quietness of the woods than I did before. I joined I started working in this field because of my fascination for animals, not the woods themselves, but animals. In the last 1 year, like psychologically, I've really started admiring the woods and how doesn't matter your qualifications and does not matter how long you spend in the woods. We know nothing about them. We know absolutely nothing about the woods at all. And you could be the most experienced person out there in the field. Nothing prepares you for how, like, the woods treat you as they want to treat you. Not saying that they're a sentient being, but they treat every person differently. I've had people that have gone to the woods with me and have been bored out of their senses and not enjoy the solitude or the company of animals or trees and all of that, not enjoy the vegetation, not enjoy the clean air. I've had people who've enjoyed it at the same time. And I really think that you can come with 1,000 expectations from what you will see in the woods, but it'll only show you what you want to see. And what has always bothered me about not just this experience, but overall is how I've lived in India my entire life. I've spent money and gone to sanctuaries to see tigers, and I've never seen tigers in my life till last year. Like, this experience happened 4 months later. I saw my first tiger in the field, in the wild.
Wow.
Which is something I had never seen before with experienced guides. I went with experienced guides. I went in gypsies and I went on foot. I have walked inside places where they know that there's a tigress that has given her cubs. Nothing ever. And my father has been taking me since I was born. So never in my entire life have I seen tiger. The first time I see it is a few months after this incident. So not saying it's related, but then, like, when I least expected to see something, like when I had already given up on the dream, all right, I won't see anything anymore. It's the first time I see it, and it's astounding. My fear of being with people is infinitely more in the woods than being alone, especially in the last 1 year. Like, I've really enjoyed my time in the woods, and I've really enjoyed being a hippie of sorts. I mean, I've really enjoyed the wood for what it is, for what it is, instead of bothering much about, all right, will I see a bear? Will I see a tiger? Will that exotic bird show up? Will I see that snake? I have not been bothered with all of that in the last 1 year. I have really enjoyed the woods for what they are. The first few days, obviously, after this incident, were very disturbing. Like, I was really, really bothered. My dreams had sort of replayed snippets of this entire incident, because this incident overpowered my senses. That's all that I thought about for the next few days. That's when I actually started reading about David Paulides and 411 and all of that. And I thought, yes, maybe it ties in that, maybe it doesn't. I don't know, but it definitely opened new avenues of what that experience was. Because if I had not gone through it, and as funny as that is, if I had not gone through it, I would not have found about David Paulides. I would not have bothered much with podcasts. I would never have heard of your podcast. I would never have heard of all these other ones. I would have never have known of people who in the world are going through similar experiences, and people who are just as alone and just as terrified and just as fascinated and just as changed after these life-altering moments, you know. So it's sort of a dual-edged sword, right, where I wish that that I could have stayed in my senses, and maybe whatever happened, as freaky as that is, Shannon, maybe try to understand it while I was in that state than be out of that state and look back at it from a retrospective lens and try to make assumptions and think about these things, maybe when I was in that state, and maybe if I had known of all these things before, or if I would have read of all these things and listened to all these podcasts and all, maybe my reactions to being in that state be entirely different, and maybe I would have had some sort of a revelation, or maybe not. I don't know. It's not like I've actively sought out after that. It's not like I go into the woods thinking, all right, I'll go into a quiet zone again. Please, gods of the nature, come and take me to the quiet zone. It's not like I'm still terrified, and I don't want it to happen. But it's definitely opened me to new avenues of life that I did not think exist. Because that ball that I saw in the sky, that ball of light that I saw in the sky back in 2012, that thing could have opened new avenues for me, but it didn't. It wasn't like I started listening to podcasts or heard of different people after this. It was only after this incident, this quiet zone incident, if that's what we want to call it.
Well,
it's only after that actually. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just happy to hear that you're still going into the woods, because you do hear a lot of times, whether it be a Bigfoot encounter or something similar to this or whatever it might be, that just it terrified someone so much that it altered something that they love doing. So it's good to hear that you're still going out there.
Thank you. And I don't think we have much of an option, considering the society such as shit state, especially the popular culture that we were saying about collectively. I don't enjoy much staying in the city anymore. Yeah. So yeah.
Well,
so the last 1 year I've saved. Yes, please go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Please.
Oh, I was just saying that you're just a treat to talk to, and I'm just so happy that you wrote me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm glad I wrote to you, and I can't thank you enough for the insider access that I have to tell you again and again about.
Oh, of
because
course.
I really am grateful for that.
Of course. No, it's the least that I can do. Just for you to reach out to me and trust me enough to talk to me about all these things that have happened to you, especially this one last year when I read that, cause that was, I think, at the bottom of your email, and I was already very interested. And then when I got to that, I'm going, oh my God, are you kidding me? I don't even know how. You can't classify that. Maybe that's why it's so fascinating.
You can't, and that's what I've been wondering about. Have you heard of anyone else that has gone through something similar?
It's in quite a bit of the 411 books, from what I can tell. I don't know exact page numbers or chapters. I do have a few behind me, so I can look those up. But in the end of his, not his very newest book, but the one prior to that, The Hunters, and I have that one actually. There is an account where there is a woman who is bow hunting. And this will actually tie in with the Rangers story a little bit. But she's hunting, and the woods goes completely silent. So kind of that cone of silence that you had mentioned a little bit about. And she sees something that is kind of a humanoid shape, but you can't really tell. It's been a while since I've read it, so forgive me if I get some of the details wrong, but we'll get the gist of it. She sees something, and it is exactly what you said that the ranger told you. Something shimmery, kind of like the Predator. And this story is actually titled The Predator, because that is the only thing that she could liken it to. And she felt, I do believe that she did feel terrified, like she was frozen, like she should not move, because, my God, you don't want something like that to see you. What the hell is it? Yeah, it's spot on. It's spot on. But see, there's all these elements of these other stories that will go into, another story. So you're going, oh my God, is this all tied in? What is this? Is it another dimension that folks are walking into? And some of them just, either they're too, which, in a lot of the 411 stories are a lot of kids. They don't know how to get out of it. But the Fae folk is the same thing. Did you hear Pam tell her story about the light with didn't it have a snake head? And then she couldn't see for hours and hours after that. She couldn't see. And she was, I can't remember if she had no audible experiences while she was having that too. I forget now. But that was in Ireland. And, the Fae folk, and when, they put their glamour on you, and you're kind of, if you accept their help, then, you're going into their world forever. You'll never walk back out of that quote unquote cone of silence or whatever it might be. So all of these tendrils definitely go into these stories, and I really don't know what to make of it.
Watch this. Are you fond of watching movies and TV series and all of that?
Oh, yes.
Yes. Have you seen this is on Netflix, I think. It's Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell.
Oh, no, I haven't seen that.
Okay, so this is, I think, one of the best popular culture representations of the fair folk. They're almost Lovecraftian in nature.
What is it called, Ash?
It's Doctor Strange, Mr. Strange and Doctor Strange and Mr. Norrell. You'll find.
Okay, I'll look that one up. Yeah.
Doctor Strange.
Have you watched Dark yet? Have you seen that on there? Isn't that good?
No, I haven't started yet. No, I haven't.
Okay, yeah, you'll like that.
Don't tell me anything. Don't tell me.
Oh,
anything.
I'm not going to tell you a thing. I'm just telling you, definitely watch it. You will love that show. Yes.
It's there on Netflix, right?
Absolutely. Completely worth the time. Especially after like 3-4 in, you're like, oh, I'm going to binge watch this now. That's how it was. Like all of a sudden, I'm like, I have to finish this. I have to know. So you will love it.
What about this is Black, right? This is the German one, right?
Yes, exactly. And see, now some people, they're like, oh, I can't watch it because the lips don't match. And I'm like, you know what? It's incredible. Just stop it. You'll be fine. The lips don't match. Oh my God. Well, why don't you miss out on a great show because you can't get over that thing.
The lips don't match.
Bless their hearts. Yeah, because, they did the voiceover in English. So, they're still talking the German on the screen, and then they just do the voiceover. So it's not, it's just a trivial little
definitely
thing.
Start that.
Oh, you're going to love it.
I'm here in Delhi for a few days, so I'll definitely start it tomorrow.
Do it. You will absolutely love it. What time is it there for you? 3 o'clock?
It's about
3 a.m.?
3, yes.
Oh,
yes.
You're such a trooper. Hey, let's keep in contact, please. You're really a treat to talk to, and I just can't thank you enough for writing me and for taking the time to share these stories.
Much obliged.
Yeah, really a pleasure. So, Ashe, I really can't thank you enough. But yeah, can we please let's keep in contact.
Yes, absolutely. If you can, you were going to send me something. I forgot we spoke about in the beginning of the show. When we just started talking, what was it that you said? You send me something, some YouTube channel. I forgot the name. JP.
I thought you already knew about him, and you were like, oh God, no.
No.
Oh, okay. It's just something funny. It's just silly. But I can still forward you that because he's just kind of being very sarcastic and very funny and poking fun at the people who are like, oh, I'm offended by everything, and he's poking fun at them. I can completely, I'll send you the link, but I'll completely,
please do.
I'll forward you that stuff. And, let me know what you think
I really
of Dark.
want to thank you for one thing, Shannon, which is something I really have to mention. So after listening to your podcast and listening to other similar podcasts as well, I actually decided that there is no such thing like that in India. So I thought that maybe I should start something. So I've recorded a few shows, and maybe I'll publish them in a week or so. And once I do, I'll let you know.
That's
please,
awesome.
If you get the time, just go through them once.
Oh God, yes, please do. Oh,
thank you.
In fact, if you want, send me what you have as far as like your bio, and I mean, people get that off just listening to you, but give me something written, and I can actually put up a blog post and be like, this is a big deal. Ashe is starting a podcast in India, which they do not really do over there. It's not nearly as rampant over here. So I will help you out as much as I can going forward with that. Oh, absolutely. Congratulations. That's great.
Thank you. I'm actually, since I travel for leisure a lot, there are these very weird folk tales, very creepy folk tales in and around India.
Right.
And the entities that are in these folk tales are just unlike things I've heard. And it's only a recent interest. And these are creepy. Like, I remember, I won't take a lot of time, but I remember in 2000, in the year 2000, there was a public paranoia, and this happened in my own state, of an entity or a being that people were referring to as the monkey man. And people were jumping off their buildings in fear of having seen something.
Oh,
like people were dying. Yes, and this happened in the metropolitan city of Delhi. So it happened in a place where there was constant media coverage. I remember there were days and days that the media news channels ran this story for days and days at an end. What I only recently realized that the description of this being was 4 feet tall, very big claws, jumps from building to building, is very similar to another thing that happened in 18th century England called the spring-heeled jack,
right? Which
was very similar. And it's also very similar in story to the folklorish beings that imps and goblins, and also at the same time lesser monkey men. Like we speak about Bigfoot and all about the tall one, but there are lesser entities under these bigger entities that are under the. Come on, it's too long to talk about, but that's the gist of it. That's what this was, and I remember this happening.
Yeah, it sounds like if you, especially since you travel so much, I mean, your podcast can be, you can sit in front of your computer at your place in Delhi, or you could kind of do like your local legends or folklore of wherever you might be traveling to. No one else is touching on that stuff, so.
Yeah,
that is
There's
wonderful
a market for that, I guess.
idea. Absolutely. Send me whatever you have, and I will help to get the word out. Can we? Do you want to go ahead and release the name of it now, so that by the time this airs, this will probably air not this Thursday, but the next. I don't know if you want to release the name yet.
Well, I've thought of a few, and one of the things that sort of stuck with me was the supranaturalist, but I haven't decided yet. So let me.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, no pressure. I was just wondering. That's really cool though. I like that. Very snappy name. Yes, when you're ready, no pressure, of course, but send me whatever you have and I'll help get the word out for you.
I will. Absolutely. I will. It's been a real treat talking to you, and
thanks, Ash.
Something that I said before as well, and I'll say it again. I think of all the podcasts I have heard, none really matches in. You can